Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughn Manor. And it's Wednesday, which means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I'll talk about a specific graphic novel or comic book subject, and Steve Donoghue on his channel will talk about that same graphic novel, comic book, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And this week, we're talking about this one. It's the Amazing Spider-Man Epic Collection. It's the seventh volume in the Amazing Spider-Man Epic Collections. It is the Goblin's Last Stand. This is pretty important, this one right here. This is a big chunk of comic book history I'm holding in my hand, because this epic collection has the issues where Gwen Stacy dies. The sad death of Gwen Stacy, the shocking death of Gwen Stacy. And it was shocking. And it's one of the most shocking things that have ever happened. Well, that's not true. In the last 20 years, there have been tons and tons of shocking things that have happened. So many shocking things that shocking things aren't shocking anymore. But there was a time when something like this actually did shock people. And it was because Gwen Stacy was a really important character in the Spider-Man comic book. Gwen Stacy was Spider-Man's girlfriend, and she had been in the comic book for a long time. She was a pretty important character. And then out of nowhere, and if you were a comic book reader, it was literally out of nowhere, she's killed by the Green Goblin. It kind of blew everybody's minds and, really upset some people, including Stan Lee, which is a story in itself, which I will tell here in a minute. So one thing I want to mention, because we're talking about an epic collection, there are a couple strange things about epic collections. First of all, they are not published in chronological order. This is volume 7, with the stories from 1972 through 73. This has issues 105? Yeah, 105 to 123. And because they're not published in chronological order, they kind of jump all around. So this was one of the earlier epic collections that was published. It's actually been reprinted at least once, because this is a very popular one because of what happens in it. But another interesting thing about epic collections is that eventually, when they are all published, you will have an unbroken run of this character's comic books. Spider-Man's comic books in this case. And because they're published the way they are, they're kind of divided up in such a way that in this one, for instance, you have 2 or 3 really, really important issues and a bunch of issues running up to that. Sometimes in the epic collections, you'll have a whole run of an artist and a writer's most important work. Sometimes you'll have a really important run, but it's kind of sandwiched in between other issues that aren't quite so important or good. Sometimes it'll be broken up into a couple different epic collections. And so in this case, you have these really important issues that everybody's still talking about at the end, and a lot of issues before that. And so it makes a good reading experience because of that, because you get a lot of issues leading up to this important thing that happens, which gives you a chance, if you're just picking up this epic collection, to get to know these characters. And you do get to know Gwen Stacy, there she is, and her relationship with Spider-Man, and a bunch of other really cool stuff that's happening in this epic collection. And you get to know these characters and what's going on in these characters' lives, right up to the point where the tragedy happens, when Gwen Stacy meets her death, which is way back here in this issue. So one thing I have to mention about this issue is that the artwork is fantastic, because most of the artwork is by John Romita and Gil Kane. 2 great Spider-Man artists. I mean, 2 of the best artists who ever worked on Spider-Man. The stories are done mostly by, some of them are done by Stan Lee, right? And Gary Conway does a lot of them. I forget where Stanley stops and Conway starts. But the important stuff at the end is being written by Conway. And this was such a shocking event that, of course, fans have been curious about how it happened for years. And there are different stories depending on who you ask. John Romita has one story. Gary Conway has a couple of stories. Stan Lee had his own story about what happened. And they're all different. Stan Lee was either going to Europe when he was told about the idea to kill off Gwen Stacy, or he was in Europe when they decided to kill off Gwen Stacy, and they either told him about it over the phone, one version, or they never told him and he didn't find out about it till he got back and he was really pissed. There are a lot of conflicting stories. But Stan Lee was upset about it, according to Stan Lee. One story that Stan Lee himself said is that, they told him about this as he was rushing out to get to a plane to go to Europe. And so he wasn't really listening to what they were saying, which seems like an unlikely story considering what they were telling him. But who knows? And then he realized what had really happened when he got back. Who knows? All we know for sure is that they decided to kill off Gwen Stacy. Now, the reason given for killing off Gwen, this very important character, is that she and Peter Parker's relationship was becoming so serious that eventually, they were just going to have to get married, or they were going to have to get even more serious, and he was going to have to reveal his secret identity. Heaven forbid. And so they felt like, you know what? Part of the thing that makes Spider-Man great is he's so miserable. His life is full of tragedy. So let's kill off Gwen Stacy to make him extra miserable and to make his life more tragic, reinforce the tragedy because he's just been too happy lately. And he certainly can't get married because, superheroes can't do that. That would never work. So, yeah, they decided to just brutally kill Gwen Stacy. And it sent shockwaves through the comic book community because it was kind of brutal the way it happened. So, let us revisit this fun-filled time that has been told and retold. So, Norman Osborn has been taking care of his drug-addled son, Harry Osborn, which has been stressing out Norman. Now, Norman Osborn, the Goblin, remember, he doesn't remember he's the Green Goblin. But suddenly, because of the stress that he's under, here he is there. You can see he has sweat on his forehead to denote stress. He's under a lot of stress. Now, that's not good because if he's under stress, he's going to remember that he's the Green Goblin. And wouldn't you know it, he's having delusions about Spider-Man. And suddenly, holy smoke, I'm the Green Goblin. I remember now. And so he becomes the Green Goblin again. And he's got to make Spider-Man's life miserable. So who is he going to go after? Our innocent victim, Gwen Stacy. There's the Goblin now. That bastard. So he goes after Gwen Stacy, takes her to the Brooklyn Bridge. I believe it's the Brooklyn Bridge. There's some dispute about this, but it sure looks like it to me. So Spider-Man trails the Green Goblin to the Brooklyn Bridge. They have a titanic battle, an epic battle on the Brooklyn Bridge. He whacks him good, Spider-Man does. But as he comes back around, the Green Goblin knocks Gwen Stacy off the top of the bridge. Now she is falling, and this is beautifully done, I have to say. The way this is done it's told really well. So she's fallen off this bridge. He has no time to do anything except shoot a web. So he shoots a web at her, and it gets her by the leg. But if you're looking closely at this panel, you see a little snap. Snap. Ah! Ouch! And so he hauls her back up, and he thinks she's all right because, you know, he lives in a comic book, and normally this would be all right. Normally she'd be safe. But suddenly the vicious real world has entered the Marvel Universe, and she's dead. Her neck has broken from the whiplash when he got her with the web, when he was trying to save her life. That killed her. Now, she would have died anyway, because she couldn't have survived this fall, and he was trying to save her life, just couldn't do it. Green Goblin comes back around, dumbass. So, this is the famous scene that we've all seen redrawn and redone a dozen times about the death of Gwen Stacy. There she is. And this is the issue right here where they fight. Once again, because imagine how Spider-Man feels. Feels like we all did when this happened, I guess. And they have a big fight. And there's a scene here at the end of this battle. It comes in later, I believe. But, God, look at that. This is... the tragedy is just so beautifully done with the artwork here. If I'm remembering, was it Gil Kane and John Romita on the artwork here? Yeah, it's Gil Kane as the penciler, and John Romita and Tony Mortallaro did the inking. And you just get some beautiful, beautiful art. It's just incredibly done. Just fantastic. And so, I mean, yeah, look at Peter Parker. Yeah, that's how you'd feel in this situation. So eventually, they have a fight. And we have a scene here which was taken directly from this issue and put into the first Spider-Man movie, where the Green Goblin tries to get Spider-Man in the back with his jetpack, but Spider-Man gets out of the way and he gets impaled by the jetpack. Happened exactly like that in the film, taken right from this issue. These were really, really important issues. And we have one issue after this tragedy where Spider-Man ends up fighting Luke Cage. Luke Cage is really, really strong. But of course, Spider-Man kicks his ass, for the most part. Now, this Epic Collection kind of ends with that issue where he's wandering off with Mary Jane. Mary Jane was actually very good friends with Gwen Stacy. And so she's hit really hard by this too, of course. And so this draws them closer together. At the end of this Epic Collection, like a lot of cool Epic Collections, they have a bunch of extras that are really good. Sometimes these Epic Collections have really excellent extras. We got some interviews and some old-timey stuff that's reprinted. Everything you ever wanted to know about Spider-Man. I mean, it's really cool. This is a great Epic Collection. I mean, this collection is great. Even the stuff running up to that, you have Dr. Octopus, you have all kinds of other stuff going on before the death of Gwen Stacy. So, yeah, this is great, which is why it's been reprinted. I don't know what the status is of this now, whether it's easy to get or not. I know it's easy to get on digital, of course. If you just want to read the stories, you can get these stories on digital. But as far as the Epic Collection, I didn't check. I probably should have checked and seen whether this is still in print or not. I know whenever they do reprint things like this, they tend not to stay in print too long because they're in such demand. This is in high demand because it's such an important story and it's such an important moment in Spider-Man's history. Sadly, I was too young. I was 2 years old when this came out, those issues. So I didn't read this when this happened. I heard about it my whole life, but I wasn't able to actually read these actual stories until they were reprinted in the Marvel Essentials line, which are these big, fat, black and white phone book size reprint volumes that were cheap. And that's how I first read these, after hearing about them forever. But I'm really happy to have it in this magnificent Epic Collection. It's a incredibly moving story. It is brilliantly done. And yeah, a very important part of Spider-Man history and comic book history. Okay, guys, that's all I have to say about it at this particular time. You have a great day.